This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 492, recorded Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we're into. The podcast is available on all of the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. If you are enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. This week, Brocket Vola is back with me, the Cat Volver, on social media, wherever you want to find him. Hello, it's been a minute, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a while. I just been living my life with two kids. Literally, the moment Joel introduces me, the door to the office peeks open, and my child looks at me. It's the first time she's peeked in this entire process. So, I've got a first grader, 6 going on 7, and I've got a fresh 4-year-old from February. Wow, fresh 4-year-old from February. I should have warmed up a little bit better, Joel. It's been a while. Sorry if I'm a little mumbles today, but yeah, things are moving along here.
I follow, of course, you and your wife on social media. We're friends on platforms like Facebook, where usually family shares are a little bit more frequent. And I cannot believe how big your kids are. For whatever reason, maybe it's because the internet is always listening. So you and I started a text chat recently to kind of set this up. And then within a day, I logged into Facebook, and randomly Facebook had decided to show me some of your your wife's photos. I was like, well, that's a little creepy. I'm sure it was just circumstantial, but I was just like, no, those are not Brocket's children. They're so
It's
big.
true.
Yeah, they're so big.
They're massive.
And super cute, by the way. Your kids have always been cute. But yeah,
Well,
it's
that's very
fun to
nice.
see. I was just talking with a mutual friend, Ryan Murphy, the other day about kids and time and to-do lists and the ever-growing to-do list that happens. Also a member of the community that has 3 kids, I think, all under 10, or I think his eldest might be just at that or just beyond that. But it's a busy time. Are you kids into sports at all? Is there any sports going on?
No, we're just dipping our toes into some extracurriculars. So at this point, they have perused dance, primarily ballet with a little bit of tap,
Cool.
and gymnastics and swimming. But Amy's shown an interest in soccer. So being a very much indoor kid as a child, it's a very new world to me, that especially we live in Texas and the heat here is tremendous. So
Mhm.
anything that requires a dedicated outside presence to me is just one of those things where you're like, oof, um, maybe not my jam. But I love for them to get outside, get some physical activity. So yeah, we'll see as they get into it. My wife and we watch football, American football, and I keep up with hockey from time to time. So they're around parents who enjoy some sports, but we're not sports fanatics 24/7. Closest thing I get is a little bit to American football with fantasy football, but so it'd be interesting to see if they get into more of a team sport thing.
My sister and her husband are hockey fans. Like that's their main thing that they
Mhm.
follow. And really, at that age, like the kids that are your kids' age, it's more about just like instilling that desire for physical activity and being outside or being active, as opposed to being on a screen all the time. Which is something that
Mhm.
I've always worked out. I've always enjoyed getting outside, but I've noticed more and more coming out of the Canadian winter here that I've been spending an awful lot of time on screens, specifically the smaller ones, which are not great
Yeah.
for your health in general. Like just everything is just like you're hunched over. Even if you go and try to like sit up straight and be ergonomic, like if you're on it for anything longer than 10 minutes, you're eventually going to slouch over, like it's just one of those things. So I find that it's been challenging, and I can only imagine, like, I'm an adult and I'm aware of how much screen time I'm on and still put in too much. I can only imagine what it's like as a parent to try and manage that. So it's always good to have those extracurriculars and those outside activities, especially when it's face to face with other kids. Like I feel like that's a big thing.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. Like, I mean, I do get together with, a group of guys once a month, go to the pub, but a lot of my interaction with friends is digital.
My kid's generation is going to be raised with the internet as a high functioning utility, a necessity, really, for everything. So that will be very different. I feel like when I was a child, and we're not that far apart in age, Joel. So I feel
Mhm.
like when we were younger, there was a portion of our grade schools where we learned how to write letters and address like an envelope to mail
Yep.
to people. And I feel like that is the same way my parents were like, "You need to learn how to balance a checkbook." And I was like, "Why?" And I never balanced a checkbook. Like I think I tried to do it like once and then I gave up. So I think there's just certain things that'll change over time. So yeah, to your point, an optometrist for a child optometrist told us that screens are not the best, but the bigger the screen and the further away you can get it from you, the better. So I use that to justify our massive television mounted over the fireplace.
Proper thing.
And my wife points out that all the only slightly smaller large televisions that are on that are not mounted and are just sitting on something that our children can easily walk up to is not necessary is kind of fighting the battle against the benefit of the other one. So there's a give and take with all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think it'll be much more difficult when they're old enough, Joel, to have phones of their own, and they have to try and be responsible with their use.
Are they into any nerdy pastimes like their dad?
Yes, some of the things we have really been into lately has finally come to a point where Wicked came out, and
Right.
my wife is a massive Wicked fan. We have a musical theater background. We both graduated with theater degrees, but we spent a lot of time around musical theater and did some musical theater. Um, Massive fan of Wicked, and the girls just loving Wicked, getting toys, listening to the movie music. My wife letting them listen to the original cast with Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth, doing all that sort of stuff. That was like one of those, for lack of a better word, like religious moments of like her having that with them and watching them sing Defying Gravity, standing on the fireplace like a stage.
Wow.
And then my wife got to see that in me and I don't know what triggered this, but basically Emerson got interested enough. Oh, it was because we went to a store and they had the original Pokemon starters, Squirtle, Charmander, and Bulbasaur as stuffies. And I pulled them off the shelf. I offered one to each of my children in the way you do in the Pokemon game, and they both selected their starter based off this one stuffy. And Emmy picked Charmander, which is the fire lizard, and then Ainsley picked Squirtle, which is the water kind of turtle-like one. And from there, it kind of sprouted. Emmy's been more and more into Pokemon. My sort of religious moment was being able to set up the Switch for Let's Go Pikachu, which is a lot more like it uses the Pokemon Go catching mechanics, which is I think a little bit easier and interesting for someone like Emmy. Um, and yeah, we she started to play that, and it was great. Pokemon or Let's Go Pikachu is just basically a redone fancy Switch version of the classic Pokemon Yellow. So it's very much oldest classic Pokemon that you're seeing in that one a lot too. So that's been really big, and now we have an encyclopedia with the pictures and descriptions that Amy's been into, and she's been playing Pokemon Go with us, which is getting us outdoors a little bit more too. It is kind of screen based, but we still get to kind of be outside sometimes, and yeah, it's actually truly been really sort of exciting to the point where uh, I felt like I need to do a bit more research because Pokemon, there's so many now. So if it's like one of the first three generations, I have a solid idea. But the pronunciation of a lot of names, I'm still learning. I probably pronounced wrong, even back in the day. But overall, it's been really great. It's been a fun way to be nerdy with her and sort of embrace something that, like I was saying, I'm not a big like soccer fan. So if she starts to get more into soccer, obviously it'd be fun to watch more soccer and that sort of thing. But it's not something I can bring a lot of um, life experience to the way I can with Pokemon. So that's been really fun, and it's led me to play the newest Pokemon game on Switch, and yeah, it's just sort of been a fun little nostalgic bump in some of these bumpier times here and there. So yeah, it's been really nice.
It's funny that you mentioned that because this came across one of the little screens that I was spending too much time on last night. The Lego Group and Pokemon have announced a multi-year partnership that will bring Lego Pokemon to fans for the first time in 2026.
What?
They just announced it. They just came out yesterday. I don't know much. They didn't really do anything other than have a Lego lightning tail of Pikachu kind of dance across the screen with nothing else visual. It obviously was just CG, kind of fun stuff.
Oh,
But
oh
if
my gosh.
there's been some really cool Lego Nintendo and Super Mario products over the last few years.
Hmm.
And obviously, Lego does a lot of really cool stuff with licensing. Some stuff better than others. I think some stuff is obviously aimed at kids' playsets, but then other stuff is aimed a little bit more at the adult collectors. And Lego Transformers is something that comes to mind for me with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee. I own the Optimus Prime. I'm looking at it across my apartment right now on the bookshelf, and it was an extraordinarily cool and fun thing to put together. Not just as like a Lego fan and Transformers fan, but just as a fan of the engineering that Lego does, the fact that the Optimus Prime build actually transforms into the truck. So it's like a Lego version of the Optimus Prime toy from the
Mm,
80s, as opposed to just a representation of the character. It was a really cool thing. Same thing with the Bumblebee. The Bumblebee model from Lego also transforms. I would argue that the bug version of the Bumblebee model is not as cool as the truck version of the Optimus Prime model, but I think it's also a scale thing because they also wanted the Bumblebee to not feel the same height as Optimus Prime when transformed. So it's a
mm,
slightly smaller set,
mhm.
which means they have limited capacity for the transforming. And again, I don't want to say that it's not great. It's just that it's a little bit different, and I think the limitations of Lego kind of show themselves. But the fact that it's still possible to make these kits, I think, is really cool. So I can only imagine, given how popular Pokemon is, what might be coming from the Lego Group and Pokemon when it eventually gets out in 2026.
That's insane because my brain explodes in every direction from adult sets like over 1,000 pieces for a Charizard set, one of those
Right,
nice ones that
the big ones.
kind of comes out, yeah, exactly, to like a play set that has minifigs with Pikachu and Squirtle and those types of things. So I think the whole realm of that is fantastic. I've really had to, I don't think I've bought Lego for myself in almost a decade at this point, simply for space. And so as my children get older, they have some Lego collections, but yeah, maybe this will be a nice little branch. Just the other thing too, the Pokemon is, it's because it's a brand, like Disney, it can be applied to other things to make those things more interesting. So Emmy and I and my wife and I really like to do, well, we never had a lot of chances, but recently do some puzzles. And I got some bigger ones, 500 to 1,000 pieces. That way it could kind of be challenging for mom and dad and Emmy, essentially. Ainsley's still a little too young to find it interesting, although she tries. And Obviously, big picture ones are a little bit more difficult. So I got one that was literally a whole bunch of pictures of Pokemon. So essentially, if you think about it, since they're framed out in the greater picture, you're essentially making like 30 different Pokemon puzzles that you set into a greater picture because
Right.
each character is by themselves. Nobody crosses over. So that was a lot more fun. And so yeah, I think that and the Lego and introducing Lego back is a more viable thing. Less than like, okay, I built it, I'm kind of done with it. Or Ainsley, who's like, as soon as the figures are built, she's kind of done with it. Which is all understandable. The value of Lego is immense. So yeah, that's incredible. Wow. What timing. Yeah, I pretty much kind of got chills when you said it was Lego because they've had some Lego-esque things in the States, but they are not Lego. And I am such a snob having touched any building materials that are Lego like, but not Lego, and how like not great the quality tends to be. I've always stayed away from the faux Legos of Pokemon in the States, but with real, grade A Lego behind it, I think that'll be just, I mean, it truly almost endless the possibilities.
And I think one of the things that'll be their strength is that they have a lot of these other properties like the Ninjago or Ninjaga, I think it's called, as well as some other existing things like the Minecraft licensing and the Super Mario licensing. That means that there's been parts that have been recolored over the years. There's been different building techniques and whatnot. And the idea of something that's more organic, like Bowser or Mario or Yoshi from the Mario games, or even the Piranha Plant, which I have. It's actually sitting right next to me. Uh, it's a lot easier now to get something like that to look cool and look right in Lego. So I'm looking at the
Mm-hmm.
Piranha Plant. I can very easily see something like a Bulbasaur being made into uh, Lego or a Squirtle, as you mentioned, because of
Mm-hmm.
the way that they're shaped. The different, some of them have claws. Well, there's claws in the Ninjaga and some of the other Technic pieces. Like, there's all kinds of really cool stuff that you can do with Lego now that lends itself to more organic characters rather than just being essentially what was for the longest time ships and vehicles. That's why Star Wars did so well, is
Mm-hmm.
because they just make spaceships. But the other thing that's nice is there's also like a range of products that for especially for adults. Like, I really enjoy the Brickheads series, which are just like, they are essentially like Funko Pops, but at a Lego.
Mm-hmm.
And they're smaller, but they're static poses. They all basically have the same shape, but it's the colors, the pieces. And I at first thought, I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy this, but I'm going to buy a couple of these anyway. And I've got like Vader and Obi-Wan. I've got the Balrog and Gandalf and a few other sets across the board. And what's really interesting is, again, the engineering and the design and how they are essentially the same pattern when you start off, but they quickly change into unique ways of solving problems for color, shape, and expression that make one stormtrooper different from the other. How does Obi-Wan's beard and robe work against Vader's armor and cape? Like, how does that all come together? And they're different enough that you do not feel like you're building the same thing over and over again. It's often like here's like a problem that they've set out to solve. They have some confines, like it has to have a certain piece count or be under one, I'd imagine. It has to meet the height requirements. What's really funny is that there's usually, especially if it's a character, like a person, there's usually a 2x2 brick that's pink, that's in the middle, that fills in the space. And it's essentially around where the brain of the character would be. And everyone has it.
Yeah.
Yeah, even when I did the Grogu set with Mando, uh, instead of a 2x2 brick, it was a 1x1 because, of course, he's so tiny. And it was just
Mm.
hilarious to me that there's a pink brain brick that you don't see.
Yeah.
It's just for the person building it to know that it's there. And that kind of stuff, I think, is just really cool. So I can imagine, again, like, Pokemon, collect them all. Imagine Brickhead's Pokemon, where you're going to build this, 3 to 4 inch tall, very accessible for kids. The price point is around 20. Well, I guess they're 12 for singles or 24 for doubles. So depending on, again, evolutions of Pokemon, maybe you get a triple, like you spend the $30 and you
Ooh.
get like the 3 evolutions of the Pokemon. Very, very cool opportunities, I think, for that kind of stuff with Lego.
I wonder if we very briefly started to watch a Lego documentary. I only got to see a small portion of some of the behind the scenes, but there are designated essentially builders. There's engineer. This is very strange, but I think it's engineers are essentially people who are building specifically things um, based more on like a directive, like build the Simpsons house or build like a Mando brickhead. And then there's master builders who I believe are just basically like, here's a bunch of Legos, go, and you can build like the sort of the more loose, the classic Lego things of like, I made a dog out of Legos. Like, this is not set in stone what a dog's supposed to look like. And I wonder if either of those two, probably more likely the engineers, but I wonder if ever, because they're just constantly playing with these things to try and come up with stuff, if anybody in passing was like, I have a few minutes, I'm bored, I just made a Squirtle. And they're like, look, if we ever get this, like, look at what we can do. I'm sure it's not necessarily that case because, again, the way corporate situations are, somebody who who works at a certain level is not going to have enough sway. But it would be fascinating to know, like right now, if somebody's out there having built, I don't know, like Sora from Kingdom Hearts, or I'm sure with all the nerds out there has built like their own Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy, or they've probably have certain things that they've done on their own that they don't have the licensing for, so they can't really publicize. Um, but like I just imagine with that much access and what they've done, it must be pretty incredible. What's sitting on desks or having been built and then deconstructed over the years with all the volume of possibility.
Yeah, especially with the number of Pokemon that are out there. And I
Mm.
got overwhelmed when I was messing around very briefly with Pokemon Go when it came out. I couldn't really handle it with my phone. It would kill the battery too fast. And I
Mm.
just remember thinking like, well, this is really cool. I don't know any of this. Like the Pokemon came out after I had already finished with that kind of stuff. So I was not into Pokemon as a young person. So I have never, it never really grabbed me. I can see the appeal though. Like I 100% get it. I think the closest thing I can relate to in terms of my own experience with Pokemon was really enjoying the Detective Pikachu movie.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really good, and I really like the humor, and I really like the designs. I thought they handled a lot of that really, really well, and so I can see that kind of vibe coming to Lego. And I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of stuff that's either going on officially at Lego where they're just building stuff for the sake of building stuff and just exercising their design skills, as well as, Lego fairs, Lego conventions, people that are just outside of Lego group that are just doing these wild and wonderful things. I remember years before I saw the official Lord of the Rings sets coming out from Lego with Rivendell and I don't think Orthanc, but certainly Barad-dûr is a set. And I remember seeing those at convention centers where they were much larger. They'd be the size of a table, where someone had just taken hundreds of thousands of Lego bricks and decided to make their, scale version of Rivendell as per like a
Mm-hmm.
minifig, and it's just beautiful, beautiful work. Too complicated for a Lego set, but you can then see like a few years later, Lego comes out with some $600 desktop set that's meant for the adult collector and has a lot of detail and a lot of stuff in it. And I would imagine there's a lot of give and take. I know a lot of Lego sets that I really enjoy started off as Lego Ideas on that website, which is an official channel for some folks to design something in Lego as a Lego fan, and then potentially have it picked up by Lego if it gets 10,000 likes or 10,000 support points. I think on Lego Ideas, it's then considered by Lego as an official set. And I know there's been some like NASA space sets that have been released in that way. There's been some objects like I think the typewriter started off as a Lego Ideas set. There's been a number of things that started off in that realm, and I have a few sets. I don't remember all of them, but I do have a few. I think one of them was a Polaroid camera. I don't think that might have been Lego Icons, but I certainly have a few Lego Ideas sets, and I'm coming up on a few months now having not built a new Lego set, and I definitely need to remedy that. The problem, of course, right now is I have a few on my list, and they're all pretty expensive. So it's like, do I really want to? Do I really want to drop that right now?
Yeah.
It's not the best time to be spending $300 plus on a Lego set. That's the only gripe
Yeah.
I have with it is that the sets that appeal to me are normally well outside of a yeah, sure, I'll just grab that for stream, or I'll do that and it'll be a fun video to make. And a lot of times I can justify it for the content that I do on stream, but when it's a big set like that, it's like, yeah, sure, I can claim it, and I can build it as part of content, but at the same time it's also a lot of costs that I don't recoup from streaming. Like it's not like that series of Lego videos brings in enough money to compensate for the purchase, so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
still it's still a loss, right? But then it's fun. And also, as you mentioned, I'm running out of shelf space. Like I don't have any more prominent play. Like there, my living room has got several sets in it. as does my studio. And if I want to get a new one that I like a lot, then something else has to go away. Like something has to go in a shelf that's not
Yeah.
visible, go in another room that I don't see all that much. As of right now, I think Ecto 1 is in my bedroom. Like it's such a big build that I just don't have room. And that's one thing that's nice about those big sets is that while they are, two or $300 Canadian, they're also 18 inches long, or 24 inches
Hmm.
wide, or they're a piece of kit. So it's an investment in terms of your build time, your play time, your enjoyment. It's great. But then you're like, where do I put a sculpture? Which is essentially what they are.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
2 foot long in my living room. That doesn't, scream out of place. Like, I mean, yeah, there's I mean, I'm a nerdy guy. I think I can get away with having the shuttle Discovery next to my TV. I think that Optimus Prime works
Yeah.
well in the bookshelf, but next to my lamp on the end table is an X-wing that is almost the same size as the lamp. Like it's it's a little much. It's very
Yeah.
cool. But I do need to have a few more spaces in my studio because I think some of these things look good in my shots for like my podcast. Like when I do the Spawn Chunks podcast, I'll have like a Lego thing in the background or other knickknacks. Like I've got a light up Minecraft torch, and I think my TIE fighter is on top of my gaming PC, and so that shows up in the background shot of Spawn Chunks a lot. But then when I reverse the shot, all of my other Lego is too high, so I don't have a lot behind me. I do have the piranha plant that's behind me in my streaming camera shot, but I would like to have something a little bit more related to what I'm doing. And so I've looked into like getting some of the Minecraft sets and things like that. And that might be something else that they do with Pokemon is that of course the Pokeball is a very iconic thing from Pokemon. And
Oh, for sure.
in Minecraft, what they did was they took the crafting bench and they made a crafting bench model that is, I don't know, I think it's about 6 or 8 inches tall, but you unfold it, like you open it up, and inside is like a diorama of Minecraft. And it has like all the different biomes and different colors and different blocks and stuff. I could easily see a Pokeball that on the outside is a Pokeball, but then you open it up with hinges, and then inside is like one of those play sets you're talking about with like maybe Pikachu
Mm.
minifigures and like
Hmm.
collectibles and like, or just some imagination of like, what does a Pokeball look like on the inside? Like, who the heck knows? Like, maybe it's like the Simpsons living room, but for Pokemon. Like, it just, who knows, who knows what it could be,
Yeah.
what it could look like. So one thing I've been dying to ask you about has been the new Superman 2025 film that's coming out. We're both big fans of Superman. We've talked about Superman on the show a number of times, and I'm just curious, have you seen the teaser trailer for the Superman official 2025 film?
Joel, I think every time I've been on the show, I've probably talked about Superman, the weather, or Borderlands. So really, at this point, I've named all the most important things I ever talk about. Which, by the way, I'm going to spare you and your listeners my excitement for Borderlands 4 coming out later this year. Anyway, now I've hit all the drinking game buzzwords here. But Superman definitely is my favorite fictional character. And I think you and I have both expressed both joy and misery with recent adaptations, both small and big screen. And I'll argue that some of the things I've seen recently with My Adventures with Superman, which is on Adult Swim in the States, which has a slight anime tinge to it. That one has been really fun because it's embraced more of that sort of silver era goofiness at times. That like All Star Superman, the comic book by Grant Morrison, also embrace when like in All Star Superman he's like stopping a sun eater and then like he like picks up a hammer that weighs like I don't know 45 billion tons or something, and it's those types of things that like you really get to play with the full dimensions and push the box that makes a realistic Superman story, because so many people want Superman to either be like, oh, nothing could defeat him, or people will be like, oh, he's supposed to be unlimited power, so like why is that creating a problem? So you constantly are having difficulty creating, in my opinion, good Superman stories. So to know that we're coming out of the Cavill years on the big screen and how the big push at that time seemed to be Superman wasn't he was too squishy and too soft and too Christopher Reeves era of a little campy or a little I don't know, for lack of a better word, maybe like soft. And then you had this Zack Snyder like punch you in the face. Superman's bending the rules of what like people really love about Superman at times, while also embracing things that we all generally love about Superman. I think Henry Cavill as Superman did actually honestly a really good job given what he was given. I feel like if they had just softened the character up a bit more, Henry Cavill's very charming. You see him in interviews. He could have been so great at oozing more charming charisma and a smile that like reassures you, which I think is really important to a character like Superman versus like a Batman who's based a lot more on fear and kind of pushing back on the darkness, where Superman is supposed to literally be a beacon of hope, and that's always been a big thing. So, the teaser trailer that I have seen, Joel, I think, and of course some pictures. I've seen the release video of the suit where he's putting on the boots, and there's a big eyeball in the background. Um, I've not seen the newest longer trailer, the one that came out for the Super Bowl, but I've seen some things here and there. Um, and I could go in all different directions with what I think, everything down to the suit. But I think the only thing in the teaser so far that has stood out to me the most, that I'm most concerned with, I guess that's the sad part, is like I get to a certain point in life where I'm more worried about what's gonna be wrong with something than what could go right, which is sad. But I think what I'm more concerned with is in a lot of the clips I've seen, Superman has like it has no smile on his face.
Right.
Like there's never a moment where he has a smile on his face. And I get it. Like we're in a world I post the Dark Knight where for some reason DC can't get out of its own head about we want these characters to feel grounded. We want people to really feel like they exist in the world. And the best part of the MCU up until Endgame, and now there's a big fatigue about superheroes. I get it, but like at the apex of the MCU, like you look at it, it was like this joy and this brightness mixed in with, yeah, you had Captain America Winter Soldier and you had bigger moving pieces here and there. And some could argue like they really soft-handed like things about like Tony Stark being basically a, an arms manufacturer and not really getting into the minutia there, and I get that. But I think at the same time there's just so much more joy, and like Endgame to me will make you feel huge big emotions for these characters that at times literally make jokes that like are completely quippy, but you will cry a second later because they've invited you in with all elements of their personality. You know, like the serious, the funny. Captain America like even makes jokes. Even though Chris Evans, I think throughout the entire series, maybe only smiles like twice. Like in every, like here's a fun activity just on the side. Go back through every clip of Chris Evans in every iteration of Captain America and try and find a clip of him smiling. Not just like kind of a like closed mouth, like, okay, but like teeth smiling. I don't think he does it once. I can't picture it once. And I get it because that's the character. But at the same time, if he's not smiling like that, and I still have this level of like, wow, I feel hope. I feel like he is not constantly, he does have the weight of the world on his shoulders, yes, but it's not, I'm not feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders in a bad way. I think that was one of the problems with the Cavill universe is like they wanted the audience to feel the weight of the world on their shoulders as they were watching Henry Cavill. And that has a place, but at some point the audience is just going to be like, man, you know, I came to watch a man fly and punch things. I get it. That's a little bit silly, but at the same time, like I didn't come in here for a massive thinker, you know? So I think James Gunn, given his background with Guardians, given his ability to both mix pop culture, humor, and satire and depth, is a good way to go. You know, I feel much better about James Gunn than I did Zack Snyder, for sure. So I have hope, but so far from what I've seen of trailers, my only concern is like if James Gunn falls into the same mindset of like we got to make sure people know Superman has a lot on his mind. It's like, yes, he does, but also he has that on his mind so that you don't, and he can inspire you to push past those limitations to be the best version of yourself. And some of that involves him smiling or being goofy. So I want to see those elements to it. I don't know. What do you think, Joel? What's your concerns or excitement?
I hope the things that you're talking about are going to be in there, and the fact that the trailer starts off by setting up the introduction of crypto in the film.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that Superman is not going to be able to smile at his own dog. Like if there's going to be some goofy stuff, if there's going to be some stuff that's really outside of the box for a Superman film, then I think a super dog is going to be the catalyst for it at the very least. But it's funny that you mentioned in what you just said, you said the words joy, hope, smiling. And these are the things that James Gunn has said about the film. I wanted this to be about joy. I wanted this to be about like inspiration and hope. And the trailer, the teaser trailer for the film, is devoid of all of those things.
Yeah.
Not only does Superman not smile, he's grimacing the entire time.
Yeah.
Your first shot of him is injured, bleeding,
Mm-hmm.
crashing into the tundra. Like, okay, I feel hopeful already. What the hell? Like it's the exact opposite of what they're saying. And I find this so very true of what's coming out of DC, specifically what's coming out of James Gunn. He's also the guy that said like the latest Flash movie was the best superhero movie ever made. Spoiler, it was not. So I can't take anything that James Gunn says other than like I just don't believe him. Like he's not giving me a track record. I really did not like the last Guardians of the Galaxy film. And while I did like the first one, the second one was kind of like a so-so, but the third one was terrible for me. And that does not instill a lot of hope in terms of the person at the helm going forward. I don't particularly like his films, and I'm also finding that as I've watched more from Zack Snyder, I also don't particularly like his films, which I think is one of the reasons
Mm-hmm.
why, you know, our discussions about Cavill Superman have been so critical. It's like it's less about Henry Cavill and the character and more about what the situations are that the character's in and the writing behind it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot going on in the trailer in terms of visual styling. It looks modern, but it also looks retro. Like there's a newsroom pit, you know, like I don't know what version of the future, whether it's like super far in the future, whether it's a retro past. Like I don't know how they're positioning it, but I don't remember seeing anybody with a cell phone. There seems to be a lot of turmoil in the world, which is accurate, but then at the same time, there's not a lot of dialogue to really kind of give you any kind of plot points. There's a little kid saying Superman over and over again, and I think Superman says the word crypto, take me home, and that's it. That's the only dialogue you get. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of visual stuff, but again, like it's all very serious. Superman is scowling. Superman is, even when he's looking at Lois Lane, it's a very serious look. And then they kiss, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, is he not happy to see her ever? There were some lighter moments. They do show a little bit of footage of David Cornsweet as Clark Kent, and he's in
Mm-hmm.
like the Daily Planet. And I will say, like visually, Cornsweet looks the part. I've seen interviews with him. He's handsome and charismatic. He seems very, obviously he can't talk about the film very much, but he seems very positive on the experience. He put a lot of work into it. I've seen him in other things. He was in the most recent Twisters movie, and he played kind of a dickhead in that, but he was good at it. And I think that he's got some chops, and I could see him leading a film for sure. I also like Rachel Brosnan. She plays Lois Lane. She looks the part. Again, there's no dialogue to really kind of get that snappy Lois Lane kind of, you know, vibe. But I like her as an actor as well. And Nicholas Hoult, again, good actor, plays Lex Luthor. I don't position him as a villain. Everything I've seen him in, he's been a lot more passive. I think the most recent thing I saw him in was The Great, I think, which is supposed to be like a dark comedy on Amazon Prime. Was not my cup of tea, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the writing. I don't put that necessarily at the feet of his performance, but I don't find him to be an intimidating person in any way, shape, or form. So as Lex Luthor, jury's out. We'll have to just wait and see. Because again, you see a visual in the trailer, but no dialogue from Lex, so you don't know much more about him. And even then, when you see the visual, he's cocking a gun, but he seems unsure of himself as he does it. And you're just like, well, look, this doesn't really feel like supervillain, you know. And so I don't
Yeah.
really know. There's a lot of other stuff. Like I think there was a shot of Hawk Girl. There's a shot of Nathan Fillion as one of the Green Lanterns who looks ridiculous. I'm not sure if you've seen this still on social media, but
I have. That character though has that terrible haircut. His name will come to me in a minute or two. But yeah, he's one of the goofier.
I'm sure it's comic accurate. And comics are goofy. And I think that there's a certain amount of comic goofy that you should just leave in the comics. I don't think it
Yeah.
necessarily works in film. Now that's a personal, subjective thing. Some people really like the goofy stuff. I It can work. Like if you had told me or talked to me before I saw the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I would have been like a talking raccoon. Are you sure? Like, is this what we're doing? All
Yeah.
right, here we go. Turns out I really like that first one. So like there are some things that can be sold, and done very well. But again, with DC's track record and with again, it's a weird crossover because like DC, I will say like has not done this stuff very well. But then James Gunn, I do like the first Guardians, and he is responsible for a lot of like the development of Rocket and Groot and some of the weirder stuff in the MCU, and that works. Like it seems to be okay. There's some potential there, but I really am not sure about the way that they're going. And I don't know the other things that I've seen, and this is outside of the footage from the teaser trailer, stills from the sets, uh, more close-ups of the uniform. It looks like frumpy pajamas. Like there's nothing. Even though Corn Sweat put a ton of work in and really got his physique up to snuff, the suit doesn't really show it off. And while there's an argument to say, well, Superman doesn't need to look like he's super muscled because he's just that way because of his physiology. I would argue that I think modern sensibilities would lean towards, well, he still has to look the part. Like I feel like the suit should be a little bit more form fitting, or just I feel like they've gone out of their way to hide all the work that he's put into his physique as opposed to show it off, and I think that's too bad.
Yeah.
I've seen very little of the flying as well, so I don't know how much fun that is. There's a really bad shot, a very viral shot of a close up of Superman flying, and it's head on, and he looks like a pug. And James Gunn's excuse was, oh, that's just the lens. When you're using this kind of wide angle lens, sometimes it distorts an actor's face. It's like, well, fair if that's what you wanted for the background. But like you as a director cannot look at this shot and say, that looks cool. It looks goofy as
Yeah.
hell. I've seen straighter faces on Minecraft sheep than on that
Yeah.
picture of Corn Sweat flying at the screen. Just because that's what the lens does doesn't mean that it's a good decision. And that's where I lose faith in James Gunn, is that he looks at something like that and he goes, yeah, let's do that. Let's roll with that. Put that on the internet. Why? Like you have to know that it's going to get an absolute pounding from people going, what the hell are you thinking? So again,
Yeah.
the jury's out. Will I try to see it in theater? Probably for the conversation, probably for the show. Yeah. Will I be waiting to see what people say about it? And not critics. Critics on superhero films usually smash them. And that's usually for me a sign to go see it. People that I trust, nerdy podcasts, other folks that are critical, but also not into being critical for critical sake. I really like the crew over at Blind Wave. I've talked about them on the show before because they will criticize something, but they will also find the good things. They'll talk about both. And they'll say like, hey, you know what? It wasn't for me, but I can see how some people might like it. And I much enjoy those conversations over this is total shit. Don't go see it. And I think that that's a good balance to have when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too if these films are being made for people that are just not you and I. Like they're aimed at younger folks. And I'm wondering if that's the case. I
Mhm.
don't mean kids. I mean like Gen Z and younger. That young adult sort of era. And maybe that's why they're just not hitting with us. But I don't know. Like I'm cautiously, I don't even say optimistic. I'm cautiously cautious. I guess. I
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense.
I want it to be good. I don't want it to suck, right?
Yeah.
If it sucks, then we're going to be years before we get another one.
Right. Yeah, and I think also honestly, my true fear is because James Gunn, when he took over all this sort of stuff, he was like, this stuff doesn't matter, this stuff matters, but it doesn't really matter, all this sort of things back and forth. But I think the biggest thing to me is I'm very concerned. It's called Superman Legacy. I'm just really concerned that like because James Gunn went on record as saying he was never interested in writing a Superman film until he could find this one thing, and then he found it, and that was something interesting to him. And I'm like, shit. When people say that, it's usually I want to make Superman a daddy, or which is fine. I mean, I haven't seen it, but the Superman and Lois show like apparently does a very good job exploring some of those things. I need to go visit that. Or they're like Superman is there's some wrinkle. They always want to add a new wrinkle. And the one of the clips for it was him sitting on like a still to promo the film was him sitting on a cloud, the sort of classic All-Star Superman pose. And for like 10 seconds, I'll just say spoilers if you've never read the All-Star Superman comics, which I highly recommend. 12 issues by Grant Morrison. Incredibly great. Again, embraces the goofiness out there while also grounding it so much because the character is so solid at the core that everything around him is just trappings. It doesn't allow itself to become untethered. And that's really important to a character as wildly fantastical as Superman can be. But Joel, have you ever read All Star Superman?
I have. It's been a long time though.
Okay, so I'm not really spoiling anything for you as much as reminding you potentially, but for like 10 seconds. So, in the story of All Star Superman, essentially within the first issue, it's established Superman has absorbed too much sun energy because of a plot by Lex Luthor, and his cells are breaking down, and he is dying because of it. So, the whole rest of this series is what is he going to do to make a lasting impact or maybe a legacy for the world, and he has these trials he's going to do. Basically, it's a bucket list kind of thing. In it has a single issue that's so focused on the brain of Lex Luthor. He's just spouting exposition about himself while there's a prison fight going on, which is a phenomenal issue. It's just filled with great stuff. But at the end of the whole series, Superman does sort of he goes away. Like there's a last clip that kind of shows that maybe he's not gone, but the general gist is this is his swan song. So I'm nervous with James Gunn starting off the new DCU and him being like Superman Legacy. The story that really speaks to me is one in which Superman, we know he's the tentpole, and then he just goes away, and now we have a void to fill. And it's like, so your great take on a character is, what if we get rid of this character? And to me, again, that is not. And they've made so many announcements. You know, Supergirl's already on the table, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way for Supergirl. Supergirl as a character, and I think what that story is going to be based on is really fascinating. I haven't read the comic, but I've heard great things. But I think in general, the thought is how many supers do we need? So if you start to saturate that world, you have to be again really good at your core to tether everything down. Otherwise, people are going to be like too many super family. You got Crypto, you got Supergirl, you got Superman. How many of these people, you know? So I think that to me is another thing that makes me nervous is I love this character. I don't want this character's film to be defined by what can we do to set up everything else but in a way where Superman just is like a brick and a foundation versus a standalone Superman film, if that makes sense. Like Iron Man was a great film on its own. If it never made the MCU, I think people would still think that was a very fun film. It was great. Was it a brick for a greater thing? Yes. Did it stand alone as a great Iron Man film? Yes. And Superman needs to be both. It can't just be a brick for another foundation. It needs to be its own thing and be able to be tethered that can speak to people who just want Superman or people who want a greater world.
I've seen that criticism online too from people reviewing the trailer and saying that I mean, sure, even if they're excited about it, it just like there feels like there's a lot going on that's outside of Superman, from a monster attacking the city to Hot Girl to the plot or subplot of the public being fed up with superheroes. There's Mr. Terrific is in it. There's a bunch of I mean, you can find, a bunch of other people in the casting as well. The thing that I agree with you there is that I feel like DC is always trying to rush to catch up. as opposed to taking their
Mhm.
time to do it right. I feel like they could easily just do a Superman film and not have any of these other characters in it. They don't need them. Superman is more than capable of carrying, his own film as a character. And I think that sure you're going to have other characters within the Superman world like Lois Lane, Ma and Pa Kent, depending on how they tell that story. You've also got um, Lex Luthor, potential another villain like Brainiac. However you decide to tell the story, there's things that you can do to bring in the superhero world in additional films rather than trying to bring them all in as like a springboard. They did it last time. Zack Snyder's Justice League felt rushed in the same way, and so I'm not looking forward to them cramming in a whole lot into this. And again, like it feels like it's leaning on the goofy. When they start to bring in as much as they can, it starts to just feel like a melting pot, and that sells comics, but it doesn't really work for film. I think that the problem there is it feels condescending to the audience. Like it feels like, oh, you're not patient enough and you're not smart enough. We are going to have to beat you over the head with what's coming. And I think that I agree with you in that the Iron Man film worked as a standalone, but they also said like, look, if this does well, then let's just set it up so just in case we want to make another one or we want to branch off into other stuff that we can sort of move in that direction. And that's what they did. And I think that it was a good litmus test. And I don't know if they're going to do that for this with Superman. I also feel like it's just too soon. Like I think I've said this on the show before, but it's not been long enough since the other Superman films and the other Justice League movies. It's not been long enough since Henry Cavill played the role to be like, hey, look, another Superman movie. People are just like, oh, yeah, I really like those things. I really like Superman. I'm interested to see what they do with him next. The first thing that people said is like, why didn't you cast Henry Cavill? I mean, obviously they can't or they won't or Cavill's not interested. But it's one of those things where, like, if it's so recent that the first response is like, Cavill is still around and of the right age that he could play this character, then you're doing it too quickly. And I think that they didn't let
Yeah.
the dust settle. They could have absolutely done other DC characters and other DC properties instead of Superman and lead up to a Superman. I feel like they could have gone the route of, rather than having Superman be the Captain America First Avenger kind of linchpin that Marvel had, they could have gone the opposite and have Superman be like the end game. Like have it build up to Superman. Have it maybe not 20 films later, but like, have a dozen or half dozen.
Or even Thor. Thor was like 4th of those, and his movie, I think, was, or maybe no, you're right. Cap was after Thor. So I guess you're right.
You don't have to start with the leader. Like you can bring things in a different order, depending on, again, like what kind of stories you want to tell. And I think that audiences respond a lot more to longer burns, especially when audiences are used to streaming series compared to films. I think that one of the success that Marvel had, it was a little ahead of the time in terms of it. If you looked at the films, granted they're longer, they act like a streaming series. If all of those Marvel
Mm.
films were a streaming series instead of a series of films, it would work just as well. And I think that that's something that DC could look at. I mean, I also don't make films. I don't make these movies. I'm a fan. And as much as I complain about them, I want them to do well. So like I don't want the Superman movie to tank. Because again, that means I feel like Hollywood responds by saying like, "Oh, well if Superman tanks, then like we shouldn't make any superhero movies for years." And I was like, "No, I like them. Please make more of them.
Right.
But just make them well.
Mhm.
Make them in a way that tells a story as opposed to pitches a property or sells a franchise. Like I think that's the main thing. But again, I really want there to be a full trailer soon. It's coming out in July, I want to say, or June this year. So it's only got a couple more months and we've not seen anything. So I'm hopeful they're going to give us some sort of, July 11th is the release. I'm hoping that they're going to give us a little bit more to chew on as far as a trailer goes. I'm assuming April, maybe. They might be waiting for a couple of other big movies to come out and maybe get the trailer in front of them. I don't know. But we'll have to wait and see. The Citadel Cafe is 100% listener supported. If you're getting value out of the show, please consider putting a little bit of value back in. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level will get you an access to the member-only Discord server, which is shared with my personal Discord, as well as access to Barista Cut bonus audio sessions when we have a chance to record those. Special thanks go out to Bean Counter patrons Cosmic and Smurf588. Thank you ever so much for your support on this episode. Patron count is at 21, which is steady on from the last time that we recorded. Our goal each time we sit down is to have at least one more patron. If you would like to be patron number 22, visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. You can get more information about the show and links to some of the things that Brocket and I talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. The music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod. You can email the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com. Find the show by name on social media. Subscribe for free on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. That includes YouTube. The RSS feed and show notes are available on our website at thecitadelcafe.com. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything I am doing online at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to my other podcast about Minecraft at thespunchunks.com. Follow me on social media at Joel Duggan. I'm also Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Saturday at 1 p.m. Atlantic. Well, this was super fun. Once again, for people that want to find you online, it's at TheCatVolver on the social media that matters, depending on where they hang their social media hat. And I hope we can bring you on a little bit more often. It's been too long.
Yeah, I know. I've could have hung my cape on the wall for a bit. I always feel like I've mentally prepped for more, and there's always more left to talk about. And then months go by, and it's like, oh, well, those things are no longer fresh. Like, I've got new fresh things. So there's a million billion things to talk about. I think that's probably why most people are like, you only talk Superman. It's like, well, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, there's always some new Superman to talk about. If you give it like a quarter of a year to a half a year, for better or for worse, for people who like that or not. But yeah, it's always great to catch up and chit chat. And I just love, I think just harkening back to the beginning of the show, like in this new social era, this show reminds me a lot of, it's a Saturday, you're out of school and your friends are like, let's go meet up at such and such's house, or let's go over to like a pizza place where you'd actually eat inside the pizza place and sit. And then everyone's just like pulling out like trading cards or their Game Boy, or you're chatting and it's that sort of stuff. And it's that cool community of sharing something you're excited about that you want to show your friend, and then also something that you both already know about, and you're like dissecting it for better for worse, and just really chewing on it. I think all of those things are great, because I feel what the best qualities of being able to talk about somebody across the world is almost as we are, is not to sort of point or have bigger, broader debates about this sort of stuff. It's also being able to find your community, and I think that's great and an important thing. And I think, again, harkening back to the hope and the smiling, that's sort of a nice aspirational part of social media and whatnot. So I really appreciate being on the show. Sorry to kind of delve into some more goofy, heartfelt things. Some would say it's corny, but again, I'm a big Superman fan, so none of this is corny to me.
Well, thanks again for being here, man. I really, really appreciate it. You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.